The first thing Marin Sterling learned every morning was the temperature of water. Not the weather. She had no weather. Water came to her in a cedar basin that sat beneath the workbench in the windowless room her parents called the annex. On winter mornings, it numbed the pads of her fingers. In summer, it felt only slightly cool, never cold enough to make her knuckles ache. She measured it by touch because touch was the one sense nobody had managed to frighten out of her. That morning, she dipped 3 strips of willow into the basin and counted the beats of her heart. 1, 2, 3, 4. She drew them out, pressed them between her thumb and forefinger, and felt the exact moment the fibers yielded without going soft. Too dry, they would split when she bent them around the rib. Too wet, they would stretch and leave a seam that would loosen over time. The water stitch allowed neither mistake. Marin had never seen a river, but she knew how water behaved inside woven wood. She knew where it searched for weakness. She knew how it gathered at a corner and pushed. She knew how one loose bind could turn a vessel into a sieve. Her father called the work therapy. He said it kept her hands useful and her mind calm. Her mother said the old patterns gave her a purpose that sickness had otherwise stolen from her. Marin believed them because she had believed them since she was 9 years old, and some beliefs grew roots before a child learned how to ask whether the soil was poisoned. A narrow oil lamp burned on the wall behind her. Its flame made the wet willow shine amber. Everything beyond that circle of light fell into familiar shadow. The drying racks, the shelves of dye jars, the locked cupboard, the cot behind a folding screen, the heavy door with iron bands, and the small ventilation grate set high in the east wall. She could have crossed the room with her eyes closed. Most days she did. The water stitch had become a map she carried in her hands. Her left thumb held tension. Her right forefinger folded the outer strip around the rib. The awl opened a passage. The strip returned through the center of the previous bind and disappeared 3 stitches back. No loose end. No visible termination. No place for water to begin its escape. Her father loved that part most. Not the beauty of it. The invisibility, the heavy bolt outside the door slid back. Marin's shoulders tightened before she heard her mother's shoes. Eleanor Sterling entered wearing gloves that reached almost to her elbows, and a linen apron over a pale blue dress. A respirator covered the lower half of her face. In one hand she carried an amber bottle, in the other a soft brush. "You've started early," she said. Her voice came muffled through the mask. "I woke before the lamp was lit. Your sleep has been poor again. I dreamed about wind." Eleanor paused. It lasted no more than a second, but Marin noticed. She noticed changes in silence the way other people notice changes in light. "What happened in the dream?" Eleanor asked. "I don't know. I could hear it. It moved around me. Dreams make danger gentle." Eleanor set the bottle on the table. "That is why they are dangerous." Marin lowered her eyes. The story of her illness had been told so many times that she no longer knew which parts came from memory and which parts had been placed there by repetition. At 9, she had collapsed after playing near a bright window. Her skin had burned for days. A physician had visited and spoken privately with her parents. After that, Julian and Eleanor told her that she had inherited an extremely rare condition they called the lunar curse. Direct sunlight could blister her. Unfiltered air could inflame her lungs. Dust, pollen, even the oils on another person's hands could set off a reaction. At first, they said the isolation would last a month, then a season, then until the doctors understood more. 12 years later, the annex had become the shape of her life. "Come here," Eleanor said. Marin rose and sat in the high-backed chair beneath the lamp. The first touch of the dark liquid was always cold. Eleanor painted it over Marin's forearms, along her neck and beneath her jaw. Within seconds, the cold gave way to heat. Not a clean burn, but a slow-crawling sting that made Marin want to scratch until she reached bone. "Don't," Eleanor warned when Marin's hand twitched. "I know. You've been better lately. It still hurts. The pain means the treatment is working." Marin closed her eyes. The scent was sharp, metallic, and sour. She had smelled it every day for so long that she associated it with safety. Eleanor brushed another layer onto a patch near Marin's wrist. "Your father has visitors next week," she said. "Collectors? We don't call them that. What do we call them? People who care about history." Marin almost smiled. "What history?" Eleanor's brush stopped. "The old work." "My work?" For the first time that morning, her mother looked directly at her. The lenses of the respirator reflected the lamp flame in 2 small orange circles. "You preserve what would otherwise be forgotten," Eleanor said. It sounded beautiful enough to be true. Marin held on to it after Eleanor left. She held on to it when her father came an hour later and lifted the finished basket without asking whether her fingers hurt. Julian Sterling wore a dark wool coat even indoors. He smelled of tobacco, cedar soap, and the world outside. He never brought the outside carelessly. Everything he gave her arrived wrapped, washed, boiled, brushed, or declared safe. That morning he brought a stone. He used silver tongs to place it on the workbench. Marin stared at it. It was gray, smooth on one side and rough on the other. "From the North Spring," Julian said, "sterilized twice. May I? That's why I brought it." She touched it with one finger. Nothing happened. The stone was cool and heavier than she expected. She lifted it into both hands and felt a small dent worn into one edge. "Water did that?" she asked. "Probably. Running water?" "Yes. How fast?" Julian's mouth tightened. "It is a stone, Marin." She looked down. "Of course." He picked up the basket from the drying rack. His gaze moved around the rim, then over the base, then to the hidden termination knot. "This one is good." Pride warmed her chest before she could stop it. "Will someone use it? Someone will value it. That isn't the same thing." Julian's eyes lifted. The warmth vanished. "You have been restless." "I only asked." "Restlessness is dangerous for you." He tucked the basket under his arm. "Finish the larger vessel by the end of the week. The Sterling name depends on it." Marin looked at the stone he had given her. "I thought the work was for me." "It is." "Then why does the Sterling name depend on it?" Julian did not answer immediately. He smiled, but his eyes did not. "Because keeping you alive is expensive." After the door closed, Marin held the stone to her cheek. She told herself the cold she felt was gratitude. 3 days later, 200 miles away, Koyath Tallwalker put his thumb on a lie. The basket stood beneath glass in a private Sedona gallery where everything smelled of lemon polish, perfume, and money. The catalog identified it as a water-stitch burden vessel from the late 19th century, recovered from a sealed cave on Sterling land. Koyath read the card once. Then he stopped reading. He had learned weaving from his grandmother before he was tall enough to reach across a full frame. He had learned which willow bent cleanly in winter and which had to be cut after rain. He had learned to scrape bark by listening to the blade. He had learned that a basket could lie if a person made it lie, but wood itself rarely did. This wood was lying only because someone had forced it to. He leaned closer. The gallery attendant cleared his throat. "Sir, the display is not meant to be touched." Koyath ignored him. The rim was too resilient. Ancient willow dried differently. Even in ideal storage, time changed it. The fibers lost a certain living spring. They grew hard in the way old bone grew hard. This basket gave beneath his thumb. Not much. Enough. He shifted to the underside where the vertical ribs disappeared into the base. There, under the dark artificial patina, his nail caught a line of softer fiber. A bead of sap gathered. Clear. Sticky. Fresh. Koyath stared at it for several seconds. The gallery attendant stepped closer. "I'm going to have to ask you to move away." "How old did you say this is?" Koyath asked. The man blinked. "The provenance is on the card." "How old?" "Approximately 130 years." Koyath lifted his thumb. The bead of sap shone in the overhead light. "This tree was cut this season." A woman nearby turned her head. The attendant lowered his voice. "The Sterling collection has been authenticated by respected experts." Koyath bent closer to the weave. He found the termination knot near the base. His chest tightened. 3 returns, 1 inner pull, the end hidden inside the center rib. His grandmother had called it the ghost hand, because the finishing strip vanished without leaving a tail. He had seen the knot only in damaged pieces passed down through families, and in one half-finished teaching tray his grandmother had kept wrapped in deer hide. It had been considered lost. Yet here it was, not copied badly from a photograph, but executed with the confidence of muscle memory. Koyath looked again at the sap. A living hand had made this, a very skilled living hand. He felt anger then, but not the quick kind that wanted shouting. This anger settled lower. It became useful. "Who sold it?" he asked. "The Sterling family." "Who made it?" The attendant frowned. "I just told you. It is an historic artifact." "No," Koyath touched the ghost hand knot with one finger. "Who made it?" A man standing near the balcony shifted position. Koyath noticed him because everyone else was looking at the basket. Silas Thorne was easy to recognize. His photograph appeared in auction catalogs beside words like preservation, recovery, and heritage. He dealt in Southwestern collections and had made a career selling pieces whose makers had no lawyers, and whose descendants were expected to be grateful for museum labels. Thorne was watching Koyath. Not curiously, carefully. That was enough. Koyath bought the basket that afternoon through money pooled by his sister Hannah, two cousins, and a community preservation fund that had not been intended for anything so reckless. Hannah did not complain when he returned with the crate. She complained after he opened it. You paid that much for proof we already knew was false? We knew the story was false. That is usually what proof means. No. We knew because it smelled wrong. Now I need to know where the willow grew. Hannah folded her arms. She was younger than Koyath by 4 years and had inherited their grandmother's talent for finding the practical objection inside any grand idea. You think the basket is a map. I think everything is a map if somebody made a mistake. They worked through the evening in his shop. Under magnification, the basket offered more than Koyath had expected. The patina had pooled unevenly beneath the rim. Inside one protected crossing, the willow retained a pale green tone. The growth rings were unusually consistent, suggesting regular irrigation. The fibers were long, dense, and flexible, likely from a hybrid cultivated rather than gathered wild. Hannah spread land records across the table. Sterling owns ranch property along the Mimbres, she said, and a private water allotment. Koyath looked at the map. How long? 11 years. He sat back. The forged collection had begun appearing in volume about 10 years earlier. Show me the water lines. 2 weeks later, Koyath lay on a ridge outside the Sterling estate with dust in his mouth and confirmation beneath his hands. The ranch looked ordinary from the road. Cattle fencing, a long adobe house, equipment sheds, windmill stables. But farther north, hidden from casual view by a rise in the land, irrigation trenches cut through the desert in neat dark lines. Willow grew there thick and straight, too thick, too straight. Koyath walked the public boundary at dusk. He found prune scraps near a drainage culvert, fresh cuts, purple dye stains, slivers trimmed to the exact width used in the basket he had bought. He crouched with one strip between his fingers, the same spring, the same scent, the same living wood. Then he saw the annex. It stood on the east side of the property, attached to the main house by a covered passage. No windows, thick walls, one vent near the foundation, a narrow chimney, a single heavy door visible from the courtyard. A workshop, perhaps, or a prison. Koyath returned the next morning in plain sight. He loaded his truck with jars of mineral pigment, willow bark, and 2 bundles of legitimate trade goods. At the main gate, Julian Sterling came out personally. That told Koyath more than any guard would have. I have ochre from the high country, Koyath said through the iron bars, and malachite ground fine. I heard you collect old weaving materials. Julian did not ask to see them. We are not buying. Good pigment is hard to find. We have suppliers. Koyath lifted a jar so the green mineral caught the sun. Your baskets use a similar tone. Julian's face changed, only slightly, a tightening beside the mouth. A pause before the reply. I don't discuss my collection with strangers. I thought collectors liked discussing collections. Not with peddlers. Koyath looked beyond him toward the annex. A faint chemical odor traveled on the wind. Under it was fresh willow. Who works in there? He asked. Julian's hand closed around one of the gate bars. No one. Koyath met his eyes. The lie arrived too quickly. Julian stepped back. Leave the property. I'm outside the property. Then remain outside it. Koyath smiled without humor. That was the plan. He drove away slowly. Inside the annex, Marin heard the truck engine through the floor. The sound frightened her so badly she dropped an awl. Engines usually stayed far from the east wing. The delivery wagons were stopped at the service court. Her father had said vibration could disturb her nervous system. He had said loud mechanical noise carried contaminated air deeper into the lungs. The growl outside seemed to shake the workbench. Marin crouched beneath it. She pressed strips of wet willow over her ears. Her breathing shortened. The medicine on her arms began to sting, and because it always stung, the pain seemed to confirm everything she feared. Outside meant danger, noise meant danger, strangers meant danger. She waited for the engine to fade. It did, her heart did not. That evening Julian came in angry. He carried no stone, no wrapped object, no small token from the safe world. Did you hear anything today? He asked. Marin's fingers stopped over the loom. A machine. What else? Nothing. Voices? No. He studied her. You are never to answer if someone approaches the vent. Why would anyone approach it? Curiosity. About me? About what is wrong with you? She swallowed. Julian stepped closer. There are people who would treat you like a specimen, Marin. They would put you in bright rooms and cut samples from your skin. Your mother and I have protected you from that. Marin nodded automatically. He softened his voice. That is what love sometimes looks like. A locked door can be kindness when the world outside is cruel. After he left, Marin sat beside the ventilation grate for a long time. She could not hear anything. Still, she imagined the engine. Then, for reasons she could not explain, she imagined the person who had driven it. The next morning, Koyath returned to the ridge, not to the gate. He chose a limestone shelf that carried sound unusually well through the ground. He set a green willow branch over a flat stone and began pounding bark loose with a smooth river rock, not randomly. 3 quick strikes, 1 long, pause. 3 quick, 1 long. It was a working rhythm his grandmother had used when seating the ribs of a sealed vessel. Not a secret exactly, more like a dialect. If the person inside the annex knew the water stitch, Koyath believed she might know the rhythm. He struck for almost an hour, then stopped. Nothing. He drank water, wiped sweat from his eyes, and started again. 3 quick, 1 long. The sun climbed. The stone grew hot beneath his knees. At last something answered. Faint, so faint he thought at first it might be irrigation machinery. Tap, 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 then a deeper thud. Koyath went still. The response came again. 3 quick, 1 long, not an echo, a person. Inside the annex, Marin knelt on the floor with her wooden mallet raised. She stared at the spot she had struck. The answer from outside stopped. For 1 terrible second she regretted everything. Then the rhythm returned, slower this time. 3 quick, 1 long. Marin pressed her palm flat against the floorboards. The vibration traveled into her bones. She did not know who was out there. She did not know why he knew the rhythm. But for the first time in 12 years, the world had not arrived as something being done to her. It had asked a question, and she had answered. For the rest of that day, Marin worked badly. The mistakes were small enough that Julian would not notice them, but she noticed everything. A crossing sat a fraction too high. 1 rib pulled harder on the left than the right. Twice she reached for the awl and found her hand resting beside it instead, listening for movement in the floor. Nothing came. By evening, she had almost convinced herself that the rhythm had been accidental. Then the annex changed its smell. It happened slowly. The familiar air was damp willow, lamp soot, vinegar, metal, and the bitter medicine that clung to her skin. Beneath all of that came something clean and green. Marin lifted her head. She breathed through her nose. There it was again, fresh willow. Not the cut strips her father delivered in sealed bins. This smelled wetter, brighter, as though the branch still remembered roots. She crossed the room and stood beneath the ventilation grate. A small bundle had been pushed close to the outside intake. She could not see it, but the scent entered with each weak pull of air. Her heart began to race. She dragged a stool to the wall and climbed onto it. The grate remained beyond her reach. She stretched anyway and touched cold metal with the tips of 2 fingers. Something rustled on the other side. Marin jerked back so hard the stool rocked. A man's voice came through the slats. Marin? She froze. Nobody outside the family used her name. The ranch hands had been told the annex stored unstable chemicals. Deliveries were left at the main house. Visitors were kept away from the East Court. Even Silas Thorne, whom Marin had heard mentioned many times, had never crossed her threshold. Marin, the voice repeated. My name is Koyath Tallwalker. She climbed down from the stool and backed away. How do you know me? Her own voice sounded strange, thin, unused. I know your hands. Fear moved through her in a cold rush. You have never seen me. I've seen what you make. Marin looked at the unfinished basket. My father says the work stays here. There was a pause outside. Your father says many things. The words should have angered her. Instead, they made her feel unsteady. She sat on the floor beneath the vent. What do you want? To know if you tied the ghost hand knot on the large vessel sold in Sedona last month. Marin's fingers curled against her skirt. That is not what it is called. What do you call it? The hidden return. Koyath let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. How were you taught? He asked. My father brought me fragments, old diagrams, pieces of damaged weaving. I learned the rest because the water leaked until I stopped making it leak. The silence outside changed. Marin had become good at hearing people think. Your father told buyers the technique had been dead for more than 100 years, Koyath said. She frowned. Buyers? The baskets leave this room. Yes, father says they are archived. They are sold as ancient Apache artifacts. Marin stared at the wall. That is absurd. I bought one. Her mouth went dry. You bought my basket? I bought a lie that happened to contain your work. No. Marin, no. She stood too quickly. You should leave. The air outside is dangerous. If you stay by the vent, you could bring something in. I have been breathing this air my entire life. You don't understand my condition. I understand willow. That is not the same. I understand acid too. She stopped. Koyath continued more carefully. The basket I bought had been treated with something corrosive. It darkened the wood and dried the surface. It did not reach every protected fiber. Under the rim, the willow was green. Marin looked down at her arms. The medicine had dried in dark streaks around her wrists. What are you saying? I'm saying fresh wood was made to look old. That does not mean no. It doesn't mean anything about you by itself. His voice lowered. So test what you can test. Marin did not answer. Don't believe me because I'm outside, he said. You've had enough people asking you to believe things. Test them. Then he was gone. She knew because the willow scent weakened, and because the silence lost the shape of another person. Marin stood beneath the vent until her legs hurt. That night she did not sleep. At dawn, Eleanor arrived with the amber bottle. Marin watched the brush. For 12 years she had looked away during treatment. Now she saw how carefully Eleanor avoided letting the liquid touch her own gloves. She saw the way her mother tightened the respirator before opening the bottle. She noticed that the brush was stored in a sealed metal tube after use. Why do you wear that mask? Marin asked. Eleanor's hand stopped. You know why. I know what you told me. I asked why you need it. The serum is potent. If it is medicine, why can't you breathe near it? Marin, if it protects me, why does it burn holes in my sleeves? Eleanor lowered the brush. The room became very quiet. Who have you been speaking to? Marin's pulse jumped. No one. Eleanor's eyes moved toward the vent. Your father warned me. About what? About someone trying to interfere. With my treatment? With this family. Marin looked at the bottle. May I see the label? Eleanor's posture changed completely. There was no maternal softness now. No pity. Only calculation. The label means nothing to you. I can read, not chemistry. Then explain it. Eleanor's hand shook once. She noticed Marin noticing and immediately closed her fist around the bottle. Your father will speak with you tonight. I asked you. For a moment, Marin saw something in her mother's face that she had never been allowed to name. Fear. Not fear for Marin. Fear of Marin. Eleanor packed the bottle into her case and left without finishing the treatment. Marin sat motionless after the bolt slid shut. The untreated patch on her right forearm felt cool. The treated patch burned. She placed one hand over the other. Same room, same air, different chemical. She did not need Koyath to tell her what that meant. The opportunity came an hour later. Eleanor had forgotten a smaller bottle near the washing basin. Marin found it when she reached for a rag. The bottle was nearly empty. It had no decorative paper from an apothecary, only an industrial label browned around the edges. She held it beneath the lamp. Oxidizing agent. Below that, in smaller print, for artificial aging of organic fiber, wood, leather. Then warnings. Avoid skin contact, avoid inhalation, corrosive. Marin read the words 3 times. On the 4th, the bottle slipped from her hand. It struck the floor and broke. Dark liquid spread across the oak boards. A hiss rose immediately. Marin stepped back. The surface of the wood blackened. A thin curl of smoke twisted upward. She could smell the same bitter tang that lived permanently in her skin. For several seconds she could not move. Then she took a fresh willow strip from the soaking basin and touched one end to the puddle. The living green dulled before her eyes. The surface grayened, the fibers stiffened. It looked old, not truly old. Dead in imitation of age. Marin dropped it. Her stomach turned. The heavy bolt scraped outside. She barely had time to kick the broken glass beneath the table before Eleanor entered. Her mother smelled the spill immediately. What happened? Marin pointed at the floor. The medicine fell. Eleanor looked at the blackened wood. Marin watched her invent the lie. It happened in her eyes first, then in her mouth. There must be a breach in the roof. Marin said nothing. A shaft of unfiltered light could have struck the serum and destabilized it. Eleanor dropped to her knees and pulled a tin of neutralizing powder from her apron. Stand back. The roof is stone. Hairline fractures happen. There is no light. You cannot always see contaminated light. Marin nearly laughed. The sound rose in her chest and died there. Eleanor poured white powder over the spreading stain. It foamed. Is that what sunlight does to wood? Marin asked. Yes, you are certain? Her mother looked up. Marin held her gaze. Eleanor's face went pale. The sun destroys, she said. That is why we protect you. Marin picked up the half-treated willow strip. Before Eleanor could react, Marin snapped it. The chemically aged side crumbled at the break. The green side bent. Eleanor stared. Marin placed both pieces on the workbench. Neither spoke. Finally, Eleanor gathered the broken bottle, the stained cloth, and the willow. She moved quickly now, without explanation. At the door she turned. "Do not confuse danger with cruelty," she said. "Your father and I have made decisions you are not equipped to understand." Then she left. Marin looked at the black scar in the floor. Her mother had not denied the label. That mattered more than anything she had said. Julian arrived that afternoon. By then Marin had rubbed soot into the untreated patch of her arm. She did it because she wanted time. The decision itself frightened her. Deception had always belonged to her parents. For years she had thought lies required a coldness she did not possess. Now she learned something else. A lie could also be camouflage. Julian inspected her skin before he inspected her face. "The discoloration is worse," he said. Marin flinched when he pressed his thumb into the soot. "You were right about the vent." His shoulders relaxed. "What happened?" "I sat too close to it. I warned you." "I know. Your mother says you've been asking questions. I was frightened. Fear is useful when it keeps you alive." He walked to the loom. "The gala is in 3 days." "What gala?" "The baskets of the ancestors' exhibition." Marin's attention sharpened. "Here? In the main house? People will come here?" "Not here. Upstairs, with my baskets?" He turned with the collection. Marin lowered her gaze before he could see too much. "The centerpiece must be finished tomorrow night." "I can finish it. You will." He removed a brass lamp from a leather case and set it on the workbench. When he lit it, the room filled with brilliant white light. Marin threw up an arm. "Stop, it is safe." She waited for pain. None came, only brightness. Her eyes watered because they had spent years in gloom. Julian adjusted a glass lens over the flame. "Filtered moonlight," he said. "A special device, very expensive." Marin slowly lowered her arm. For the first time she saw the basket clearly. Not in amber shadow. Not by touch alone. The ochre glowed. The purple dye deepened where the fibers crossed. The rim spiraled with such precision that she had to step closer to believe her own hands had made it. Something inside her shifted. She had known she was skilled. She had never been permitted to see that she was extraordinary. Julian mistook her silence for awe at his generosity. "Work through the night," he said. "This will help." Marin looked at the lamp. "Will it hurt me if I sit too close?" "No." "How do you know?" He hesitated. "Because I paid a great deal to make certain." The answer made no sense. Marin nodded, as if it did. After he left, she placed both hands under the white beam. Minutes passed, no burns, no blistering, no pain beyond the lingering irritation from the patina. She laughed once quietly. Then she cried, not for long. There was too much to do. She finished the centerpiece before dawn, but she changed one thing. Deep beneath the rim, hidden where only another skilled weaver would think to inspect, she tucked a sliver of fresh green leaf into the final return. A living thing inside a manufactured corpse. Evidence. Koyath returned the following night. Marin heard him before he spoke. A soft scrape of boot against stone. Then the scent of sage drifted through the vent. She sat beneath it. "I found the bottle," she said. No greeting. "I hoped you would. It says patina compound." Koyath was quiet. "My mother put it on my skin. I know. You suspected. Yes. Why didn't you say it the first night?" "Because if I told you everything at once, I would sound like another man explaining your life to you." Marin closed her eyes. That answer hurt in a way kindness sometimes did when a person had lived too long without it. "I put my hand under the lamp," she said. "Nothing happened. Good. My father says it is special moonlight." Koyath let out a tired breath. "Your father has an impressive imagination." Despite herself, Marin smiled. The expression felt unfamiliar on her face. "What does the sky look like tonight?" she asked. Koyath took a moment before answering. Blue-black above the ridge, a little purple in the west. One cloud over the south mesa, thin enough that the moon shows through it. Marin leaned back against the wall. "What color is moonlight?" "Depends what it lands on." "That is not an answer. It lands silver on stone, white on dry grass, almost blue on willow leaves." She tried to build the scene from his words. "Is the air cold?" "Cold enough that I wish I'd brought another shirt." "Does it hurt?" "The cold, the air, no." "What does it smell like?" "Sage dust. The irrigation ditch. Somebody burning cedar about a mile west." Marin breathed in the weak trace coming through the vent. "My mother said strangers would be disgusted by me." Koyath did not answer immediately. "She said my skin was deformed, that mirrors would frighten me." "What do you see when you touch your face?" "My fingers." He laughed softly. Marin's smile returned. Then he said, "Find a mirror." "I don't have one. Your family owns half the shiny objects in New Mexico. None are kept here. Then find something that reflects." She looked toward the storage alcove. Julian kept discarded acquisition material there, objects waiting to be cleaned, catalogued, sold, or forgotten. I may know where. Good. Koyath, yes? Why are you doing this? The silence outside lasted long enough that she wondered whether he had left. Then he said, My grandmother taught me that a tradition dies. Once, when people stop practicing it. Again, when someone convinces the world it never belonged to living people. Marin held her knees. And me? You are not a tradition. No, I came because of the work, he said. I stayed because someone had to know the difference. That was the first time in Marin's life anyone had separated her value from what she produced. After he left, she went to the storage alcove. The oak chest sat beneath 2 crates of broken pottery. She moved them one at a time, grunting under their weight. Inside the chest were spurs, old buckles, tarnished serving pieces, and a flat round object wrapped in stiff hide. Marin lifted it out. Copper, the surface had gone green with age. A mirror, perhaps, though at first it reflected only a dark blur. She sat under the white lamp and polished it with the edge of her linen skirt. Nothing, she tried a rag. Still cloudy. At last she loosened her hair and used a thick strand to rub the metal in small circles, remembering how fine fibers could polish a surface without scratching it. Orange warmth emerged beneath the green crust. She worked until her arms shook. Then she lifted the copper disc, an eye appeared. Marin stopped breathing. Dark iris, thick lashes, a face behind it, her face. She tilted the mirror. The woman in the copper was pale from years without sun. Her cheeks were narrow. Her hair was badly cut at the ends from doing it herself. Dark chemical streaks marked her jaw and throat. There were irritated patches near her wrists, but there was no monster, no ruined mouth, no cracked face, no hideous deformation. Marin touched her cheek. The woman did the same. She rubbed one of the dark lines near her jaw. It flaked away. Healthy skin appeared underneath. Marin made a sound she had never made before. Not a sob exactly, more like air leaving a place that had been sealed too long. She carried the mirror to the basin. She washed her face. The water turned brown-purple. She washed her neck. She washed one arm from elbow to fingertips, scrubbing until the skin reddened from friction. Then she held the clean arm beside the treated one. The difference was obscene. Not because the treated arm was ugly, because somebody had worked so hard to make it look sick. Marin stared into the mirror again. You knew, she whispered. She did not know whether she was speaking to Eleanor, Julian, or the frightened child she had been. You both knew. The gala began the next evening. Marin heard it through walls she had once believed separated her from a deadly planet. Carriages arrived first, then automobile engines. Doors slammed, voices gathered. Music started in the main hall. Strings, piano, the soft swell of polite conversation. The annex felt smaller with every new sound. Julian came just before sunset to take the centerpiece. Marin had washed most of the chemical from her face, then reapplied a thin layer so he would not see the full change. She wore no hood. Julian stopped in the doorway. Where is it? On the chair, the hood. I was working under the safe lamp. That is irrelevant. He crossed the room and picked up the heavy velvet covering from the floor. Marin stood still. He raised it toward her head. She stepped back. It was less than a foot. It might as well have been a continent. Julian froze. Marin heard the music through the walls. He lowered the hood slowly. What have you been told? He asked. About what? Do not play games with me. I don't know how. His eyes went to the vent. Then to the copper mirror half hidden beneath cloth on the bench. Marin saw recognition flash across his face. He reached for it. She moved first and placed her hand on top. Julian looked at her fingers, clean fingers, no dark stain. His face emptied. Marin, she held his gaze. What is in the medicine? He did not answer. What is in it? You are overtired. It says patina compound. Julian's mouth became a hard line. You went through restricted materials. You put it on me. For your condition. It ate the floor. The dose matters. It aged willow in minutes. You have no understanding of chemistry. I understand what happened when I washed it off. For the first time in her life, Julian looked at Marin as though he were unsure what she might do. That frightened her. It also gave her strength. He lowered his voice. Listen carefully. Whatever confusion you are experiencing, we can address it after tonight. There are important people in this house, people whose decisions affect this family. You will stay here. You will finish the remaining tray. You will not make noise. You will not open the door. Or what? The question left her before fear could stop it. Julian stared. Marin stared back. Something old and final passed between them. At last he took the centerpiece and walked out. The bolt slammed into place. Marin waited until his footsteps disappeared. Then she went to the door and put her ear against it. Somewhere beyond the corridor, applause began. She looked at the copper mirror, at the clean skin of one forearm, at the willow sliver she kept hidden in her sleeve. Then she knelt beside the lock. For 12 years she had used willow to make things hold. Tonight she intended to find out whether it could also make something let go. Koyath entered the Sterling house carrying 12 glasses of champagne. Hannah had called the plan foolish. Then she had helped him find a catering coat. A hotel kitchen in town supplied staff for the gala, and one waiter had been persuaded, through cash, an old favor, and Koyath's promise that no blame would fall on him, to trade assignments for the night. By 7 o'clock, Koyath stood in a service passage, wearing a black vest that pulled across his shoulders and shoes too narrow for his feet. He hated both. The silver tray, however, was useful. He could move anywhere as long as he carried it. The Sterling main hall had been transformed into a theater of mourning for a culture the hosts were actively exploiting. Tea-colored silk had been draped over chandeliers to soften the light. Pedestals were arranged beneath spot lamps. Each basket carried a cream card describing a dead maker, a vanished community, or a cave discovery so dramatic it might have been written for a dime novel. Koyath recognized 3 pieces from published auction catalogs. He could now see the family resemblance in the work. Not ancient family, one pair of hands, Marin's. Even when Julian had instructed her to vary pattern or die, the tension told the truth. The rims leaned almost imperceptibly toward the dominant pull of the right hand. The hidden returns ended at the same depth. On one tray, a small correction near the center showed where the weaver had changed pressure after a rib softened too quickly. Koyath had made the same correction 1,000 times. He felt unexpectedly close to her, standing among people who did not know she existed. Silas Thorne moved through the room with the nervous elegance of a man carrying a glass filled to the rim. He greeted curators, redirected questions, and kept guests from lingering too close to the displays. Koyath watched him intercept an older museum scholar who bent toward the centerpiece. "Please," Thorne said with a smile. "The fibers are exceptionally fragile." Koyath nearly laughed. The fibers were probably younger than some of the wine being served. Julian Sterling appeared at the foot of the staircase just before 8. Applause rose. He looked every inch the benefactor he had built himself to resemble. Silver at his temples, tailored black coat, white collar, a hand resting modestly over his heart as though embarrassed by admiration. Eleanor stood beside him in dark green silk. From across the room, Koyath saw how tightly she held her fan. Thorne took his place near the stage. The centerpiece waited beneath glass. Marin's leaf was invisible inside it. Julian began speaking. He spoke well. That made Koyath angrier than bad lies would have. He described the water stitch as the sacred work of a vanished Apache lineage. He spoke of loss, silence, and the obligation of wealthy custodians to protect fragile remnants of native genius. He praised unnamed women who had carried tradition through hardship. He said the word women without once thinking of his daughter in the locked room down the hall. Koyath watched the guests listen. Some were vain, some were greedy, some probably believed they were doing good. That was the dangerous part. A lie supported by people who enjoyed it could survive longer than one supported only by criminals. Julian lifted the centerpiece from its stand. "This vessel," he said, "was found sealed beneath collapsed stone near the Gila, protected from sun and moisture for more than a century." Koyath looked at the basket. Moisture shone under the rim. He set down his tray. A server beside him whispered, "What are you doing?" "My job. That is not your job. Tonight it is." Koyath walked forward. Julian saw him halfway across the hall. His speech faltered on one word. Most guests did not notice. Thorne did. He moved toward the security chief. Koyath reached the front row. "You said it was sealed for 100 years, he said. Julian smiled thinly. "This is a private presentation, so answer privately. How is the wood still alive?" The room shifted. Not silence yet. Attention. Julian's smile remained. "I'm afraid one of the staff has mistaken enthusiasm for expertise." A few guests laughed. Koyath looked at the older museum curator seated near the aisle. "You examined a Sterling basket in Sedona last month." The curator frowned. "I did. You were not allowed to touch it." Thorne stepped forward. "That is standard conservation procedure." Koyath pointed at the centerpiece. "Ask him to touch this one." Julian's expression changed. Security. The chief took 2 steps. The curator stood. "Mr. Sterling," he said, "I would like to inspect the piece." Julian looked at him, the refusal caught in his throat. All evening he had been telling these people they were guardians of history. He could not now tell one of their most respected scholars that history was too delicate for his fingers. "Of course," Julian said. With care, the curator approached. Koyath stepped aside. Julian held the basket out reluctantly. The curator touched the base. His thumb pressed into a rib junction. When he pulled away, a clear bead clung to the pad of his finger. He stared. The entire room seemed to inhale. The curator rubbed finger and thumb together, then smelled them. "Willow sap," he said. Julian gave a short laugh. "Preservative residue, no." The curator's voice was quiet. That made it worse. "No, Mr. Sterling." Koyath stepped forward and gently turned the basket. He saw the hidden return, near it exactly where he hoped, a flash of green. He used a fingernail to draw out the tiny leaf sliver. Still soft, still green at the center, he held it beneath the lamp. "Caves do remarkable things," Koyath said. "But I've never known one to preserve chlorophyll this well for a century." A murmur broke across the room. Julian's face reddened. Thorne whispered to the security chief. Two men moved toward Koyath. He had expected that. From beneath his catering coat, Koyath pulled a bundle of fresh-cut willow and threw it across the polished floor. Branches scattered among evening shoes and trailing silk. The smell of living wood rose immediately. Several guests stepped back. "What is this?" "Same hybrid," Koyath said. "Same irrigation-fed growth. Cut yesterday from the north side of this property." Julian lunged toward him. "You trespassed. I stayed outside your fence when I took samples from the drainage. You are a thief. And you are selling work made this week as work made before my grandmother was born." The security men seized Koyath by the arms. He did not fight them. Instead, he raised his voice. "The weaver is alive." The room fell still. Julian's face changed completely. Koyath kept speaking. "She is in the east annex, windowless stone room connected to this house. One exterior vent, one iron door. You want to know who made your collection? Open that door." Julian shouted, "Remove him." Koyath dug his heels into the carpet. The guards tightened their grip. "The weaver is alive," he shouted again. "Ask Julian Sterling who is locked in the annex." Eleanor dropped her fan. It struck the floor with a small wooden crack. Half the room looked at her. That was the first public fracture. Julian turned on the guests. "My daughter is gravely ill," he said. "This man has been harassing our family. The annex is a medical environment. Opening it would endanger her life." The curator looked from Julian to the green leaf in Koyath's fingers. "Your daughter weaves?" Julian hesitated. Eleanor answered too quickly. "As therapy." Koyath laughed once. "Therapy that sells for $30,000 a basket." Thorne's head snapped toward him. "How could you possibly know the sale prices?" "I bought one." A woman near the front whispered, "My God." The guard forced Koyath to his knees. His cheek nearly struck the carpet. He twisted enough to keep speaking. "East corridor. Stone annex. Open the door." Julian stepped onto the dais. "Enough. This is an extortion attempt by a disgruntled radical who wants to discredit legitimate preservation work." Koyath looked at him from the floor. "You don't even know what preservation means." Julian pointed toward the service entrance. "Get him out." The guards dragged Koyath backward. Then a sound came from the east corridor. Metal scraping. Everyone stopped. Another scrape. Then a dull thud. Julian went white. Koyath stopped resisting. He knew that sound, not because he had heard that particular lock before, because he had spent his life listening to Willow under tension. Inside the annex, Marin worked the sharpened rib into the lock the way she would work a stubborn strip beneath a finished row. She could not see the tumblers. She did not need to. Resistance traveled through the wood. The first pin lifted too far. She eased back. The second caught. She changed the angle. Click. Her hands shook. She stopped and pressed her forehead against the door. From the main hall came shouting. Koyath's voice, her father's. Then her name, faint through the corridor. The willow rib slipped. Marin closed her eyes. For years, every mistake had cost only time or wood. This one felt larger than her life. She inserted the rib again. Click, click. The last pin refused to move. Marin nearly forced it. Then she remembered the water stitch. Tension did not obey anger. She loosened her grip, breathed, applied steady pressure. The pin lifted. The bolt released with a groan. Marin stared at the handle. The lock was open. Nothing happened. No wall collapsed. No poison flooded under the door. Freedom, she discovered, could be frighteningly quiet. She wrapped her hand around the brass handle and pulled. The door moved inward. Air touched her face. Fresh air unfiltered. She gasped. Her body waited for catastrophe. The air smelled of polished wood, wax, food, perfume, smoke, and something floral she could not name. It was cooler than the annex. It moved lightly over the wet skin near her wrists. No burning, no choking. A lamp in the corridor shone brighter than anything except Julian's special white lamp. Marin stepped into it. 1 second, 2, 5. Her skin remained skin. She looked down at her arms. Dark chemical streaks, pale patches, calluses whole. Marin laughed. The laugh came out broken because terror and relief were fighting inside it. Then she saw a window. She had forgotten windows could be that large. Beyond the glass, night covered the desert in blue-black depth. Mountains cut into the horizon. Stars filled so much sky that Marin had to grip the window frame. Koyath had not described enough. No one could. A breeze found a gap in the frame and touched her cheek. Marin closed her eyes. Her parents had told her wind could tear her skin. It felt like a hand opening. Shouting pulled her away. She took the copper mirror from beneath her arm and walked toward the main hall. Her bare feet made almost no sound. At the doorway she stopped. There were more people than she had imagined could fit inside one room. Faces turned toward her in a wave. Music stopped. A glass slipped from somebody's hand and broke. Marin saw Koyath first. 2 guards held him near the service passage. He had dust on one knee and a tear in the sleeve of the ridiculous black vest. His face looked exactly as his voice had sounded. Weathered, tired, steady. He looked at her, not at her stained skin, not at the plain shift she wore. Her Marin knew it instantly. Then Julian moved. Marin? He crossed the room fast enough to knock into a pedestal. What have you done? Get back inside. She did not move. The air, he said. You've exposed yourself. Eleanor, get the serum. Eleanor remained where she stood. Marin, darling, she whispered. Marin turned toward her mother. Eleanor looked older beneath the chandelier light. Not crueler. That would have been easier. Just older. Frightened. Human. Marin hated that part of the truth. Monsters would have made sense. Parents who had chosen greed, fear, and status one decision at a time were harder to understand. Julian grabbed Marin's upper arm. She pulled free. The room reacted to that small movement as though she had slapped him. Do not touch me. Her voice was hoarse. Julian stared. Marin, you are confused. No, you have been manipulated. No, you are ill. Marin looked at the guests, then at a side table where a crystal pitcher stood in a basin of melting ice. She walked toward it. Julian followed. What are you doing? She lifted the pitcher. Water trembled inside. Her hand trembled too. Marin. Eleanor's voice sharpened. Don't. That single word confirmed everything again. Marin held out her left arm. The patina mixture covered it from wrist to elbow, dark and streaked. She poured. Cold water struck her skin. Several guests gasped. Julian lunged. Koyath moved at the same instant. He did not break free of both guards, but his sudden motion pulled their attention long enough for the museum curator to step between Julian and Marin. Let her, the curator said. Water ran black-brown from Marin's arm. It hit the white marble floor in ugly streaks. The chemical smell rose. Marin scrubbed with her free hand. More dark liquid loosened. The pitcher emptied. Underneath was pale skin reddened only by the harsh washing. No sores, no splitting, no blistering from the air or light. Marin held up her arm. The room was silent. Eleanor sat down abruptly in the nearest chair. Julian's face had gone gray. Marin looked at him. This is your lunar curse. He opened his mouth. No words came. She turned the clean arm under the chandelier. You said light would burn me. Marin, you said wind would tear my skin. You don't understand the delayed effects. You said the medicine protected me. It did. It says patina compound on the bottle. A murmur moved through the guests. The curator looked sharply at Julian. Marin continued. It says for artificial aging of wood and organic fiber. It says avoid skin contact. My mother rubbed it on me every day. Eleanor covered her mouth. Someone near the back cursed under his breath. Julian found his voice. She is hysterical. She has been isolated because of a documented condition. Then show us the documentation, the curator said. Julian turned on him. This is a family medical matter. Your family medical matter appears to be standing beneath electric light without injury. It can take hours. Marin laughed. This time the sound was clear. It startled her. Julian looked at her as if laughter itself were betrayal. Koyath spoke from behind the guards. Show them the knot. Marin looked at him. He nodded toward the centerpiece. Julian stepped in front of it. No, that word doomed him more completely than any accusation. The museum curator moved to one side. Miss Sterling, he said carefully. Did you make that vessel? Marin's throat tightened. All her life her work had belonged grammatically to someone else. Father's collection. Sterling archive. Family preservation. Ancient pieces. She looked at the basket. Yes. When? I finished it yesterday morning. The curator closed his eyes briefly. A woman in pearls whispered, "Dear God." Marin approached the pedestal. Her father tried to block her again. Koyeth said Julian. It was only his name. But something in Koyeth's voice made Julian stop. Marin lifted a loose green strip from the bundle Koyeth had thrown across the floor. She examined it by touch. Too dry at one end, suitable at the other. Her fingers found the right section. She bent it around a demonstration rib lying beside the display. For the first time, she performed the water stitch in front of other people. Her hands did not know they were supposed to be afraid. They moved as they always moved. Fold, pull, turn, open the path, return 3 stitches. Draw through the center rib, hide the end. The curator leaned close. Koyeth's eyes never left her hands. Marin completed the bind and held it up. The curator touched the termination point. He could not find the loose end. This is the same method, he said. Koyeth shook his head. No, this is the method. The baskets are copies of her own hands. Marin looked at him. He corrected himself. Not copies, her work. That mattered. More than he knew. Silas Thorne began moving toward the side door. Hannah would later say that guilty men developed a special kind of walk. Not running, not casual, but suddenly interested in being somewhere else. Koyeth saw it. So did he said, pointing. Thorne stopped. Every face turned. Julian seized the opportunity. This entire accusation is being orchestrated by Tallwalker. Thorne can explain the provenance. Silas looked at Julian, then at the living leaf on the table, then at Marin. For years he had controlled risk by making certain someone else always held more of it. He reached to his lapel, removed the small brass badge of his gallery, and placed it on a silver tray. I think, he said, the Sterlings should explain their own household. Julian stared at him. You coward. Thorne's expression hardened. You told me the girl was ill. Marin watched the lie move from one man to another. You knew the baskets were new, Julian snapped. I knew you had an unusual source. You signed every certificate, and you supplied every piece. The guests drew back as if the argument emitted heat. Eleanor began to cry. She slid from the chair to her knees beside the pedestal. Marin, she said, please, you don't understand what will happen. Marin turned toward her. What will happen to whom? Eleanor's eyes moved to the baskets. That was the answer. We will lose everything, she whispered. Not you might be hurt, not I am sorry, everything. The house, the land, the money, the position. Eleanor reached for the centerpiece and held it against her chest. We can fix this, she said. We can return the sales. We can say there was a misunderstanding about dates. We can. Marin looked at her mother clutching a basket the way another mother might clutch a child. Something in Marin became very still. No, she said. Eleanor began to sob harder. Marin felt no triumph, only exhaustion. A county judge happened to be among the guests, so was a federal museum representative. Within 20 minutes, a messenger had been sent for the sheriff. Within 40, the East Annex had been opened to witnesses. The first group entered wearing handkerchiefs over their mouths because the chemical fumes were so strong. They found the aging solution. Industrial labels, ledgers, auction catalogs, stacks of fresh willow, finished baskets waiting for treatment. A locked cabinet contained invoices for oxidizers and forged provenance paper. Another held letters between Julian and Thorne discussing demand, scarcity, and the need to reduce what one letter called the maker's idle hours. The maker. Marin read the phrase over the curator's shoulder. She felt less pain than she expected. There was relief in seeing cruelty written plainly. It no longer had to hide inside words like protection. The sheriff arrived after midnight. By then the gala had become an investigation. Guests remained because nobody wanted to leave history while it was being rewritten in front of them. Koyeth was released by security before the sheriff came. One of the guards muttered an apology while cutting the cord that had been used to bind his wrists. Koyeth rubbed the red marks and went directly to the annex. Marin stood at the workbench with the copper mirror in one hand. For the first time, the door remained open behind her. He stopped several feet away. Neither spoke. Marin had imagined his face from his voice, but imagination had made him taller and perhaps younger. Reality gave him deep lines beside the eyes, dust in his hair, and a small scar along one cheek. You look disappointed, he said. She blinked. I thought you would be taller. Koyeth stared. Then he laughed. Marin laughed too. It was such an ordinary exchange that it nearly broke her. She sat down abruptly. Koyeth did not rush toward her. He crouched at a distance. I brought you something, he said. From his satchel, he unwrapped a bundle of willow and damp cloth, fresh green stems. Marin reached for them. The scent filled her nose. Not sealed bins, not chemicals, river and bark and damp earth. She pressed the bundle to her face. Her shoulders shook once. Koyeth looked away to give her privacy. That small courtesy made the tears come faster. When she had finished, Marin wiped her face with the back of her hand. Did my father steal the technique? No, Koyeth said. Not exactly. She waited. He collected fragments. Your hands understood something he didn't. The hidden return appears in pieces connected to my great-grandmother's line. The exact sequence disappeared from regular teaching. You rebuilt it. But then it isn't mine. It is not only yours. Marin nodded slowly. Koyeth continued. But what you rebuilt is yours to be credited for. Tradition is not ownership the way your father understands ownership. You don't have to choose between ancestry and your own labor. Marin ran a thumb over the green willow. My father said I preserved history. He accidentally told you the truth about one thing. She looked at him. You did preserve something. He just lied about who deserved the name. Outside, boots moved through the corridor. Paper rustled. Voices called inventory numbers. The room where Marin had lived almost half her life was being turned into evidence. What happens now? She asked. Koyeth leaned his forearms on his knees. I don't know. The answer surprised her. You came all this way without a plan? I had a plan to find the Weaver. And after? I assumed the Weaver would have opinions. Marin looked toward the open door. For so long, other people had described her future as though it were a medical schedule. Stay inside, take the treatment, finish the work, rest, repeat. Now someone had handed the future back to her and admitted he did not know what it should contain. It was terrifying. It was respect. I want to see the sun, she said. Koyeth nodded. Then morning is a good time. She looked at her arms. What if they were right about one part? Then we find out carefully. You believe I'm healthy. I believe your father is a liar. That is not the same as being a doctor. Marin smiled faintly. Good, I'm tired of certainty. Koyeth nodded. So am I at dawn. Marin stood in the courtyard with the copper mirror tucked under one arm and Koyeth several paces away. The eastern ridge turned gray first. Then violet. Then a thin line of orange appeared. Marin's breathing changed. Every story Julian had told her returned at once. Skin peeling, eyes burning blind, blood overheating beneath the surface. She nearly ran back inside. Instead, she held one hand out. The first sunlight touched her fingers. Warm, that was all. Marin waited. Nothing blistered. Light moved across her knuckles. She began to cry quietly. Koyeth stayed where he was. The sun climbed enough to touch her face. Marin closed her eyes. Warmth spread over her cheeks. For the first time in 12 years, she did not count her heartbeat. She forgot. The sheriff did not arrest Julian at dawn. Marin expected him to. She had spent the night watching strangers label bottles, seal ledgers, and carry her baskets through the corridor in padded crates. Everything seemed obvious now. The acid, the false certificates, the letters, her locked room. But law, she learned, moved differently from truth. Truth could arrive all at once. Law wanted statements, dates, signatures, jurisdiction, an inventory of every sale connected to the Sterling collection. The sheriff placed Julian under guard in his own study, while telegrams went to Santa Fe and territorial officials. Eleanor was confined to her bedroom after a physician examined her and declared that her collapse at the gala was nerves, not illness. Marin found that detail darkly funny. For once, somebody else in the family had been diagnosed with a condition that did not require a locked room. A real doctor examined Marin later that morning. Dr. Amos Pell was a small man with graying hair and a leather case that smelled of alcohol, paper, and soap. He did not approach her until she said he could. That alone felt strange. May I look at your arm? He asked. Marin held it out. He examined the irritated patches, asked about pain, numbness, peeling, breathing difficulty, and headaches. He listened to her lungs. He checked her eyes in normal daylight. He requested a sample of the dark compound and frowned when a deputy handed him the bottle. How long was this used on you? 12 years. Pell looked up. Every day? Most days. Sometimes twice if Mother said the reaction was worse. The doctor's face changed in a way Marin had seen several times since the gala. People kept trying not to show horror in front of her. She was beginning to dislike it. Say what you are thinking, she said. Pell set the bottle down. I'm thinking prolonged exposure could explain the irritation, some of the numbness, and perhaps the headaches you described. Could it have made sunlight dangerous? Not in the way you were told. Could I have a disease they missed? It is possible for any doctor to miss something. I see no evidence of a condition that requires darkness or isolation. Marin studied him. You are not certain. No honest physician should pretend certainty when he has known a patient for 30 minutes. Marin almost laughed. She liked him immediately. He advised her to increase sun exposure gradually because her skin had been sheltered for years and because irritated areas needed time to heal. Ordinary caution, a hat at noon, clean water, soap gentle enough not to strip damaged skin, fresh air, food, rest, no curse, no sealed room, no poisonous ointment. When he finished, Pell closed his case and looked around the annex. You slept here? Yes. And worked here? Yes. For 12 years? Yes, the doctor swallowed. Marin sighed. You're doing the face. What face? The one where you try not to look horrified. Pell looked embarrassed. I apologize. Don't, just stop. He nodded. I will. That was another new thing. People could be corrected without punishing her for the correction. By noon, 2 federal marshals arrived. By late afternoon, Julian was in handcuffs. He stood on the front porch while deputies moved around him carrying boxes of documents. His coat was wrinkled. He had not shaved. Without the architecture of the gala around him, he looked less like a patriarch and more like a tired man in expensive clothes. Marin watched from beneath the shade of the veranda. He noticed her. For a moment, neither moved. Then Julian said, I would like to speak with my daughter. The marshal looked at Marin. Not at Julian. Do you want that? Marin surprised herself. Yes. The marshal remained close enough to hear but gave them a few feet. Julian studied her face in daylight. His eyes settled on the healthy skin he had spent years describing as ruined. You should wear a hat, he said. Marin stared at him. Even now, even with iron around his wrists. Control arrived disguised as concern. The doctor already told me that. Julian flinched at the word doctor. He does not know your history. He asked me. I mean your family history. So tell me. Julian looked toward the drive. Marin waited. What illness did I have at 9? She asked. He said nothing. What happened to me? You had a reaction to what? We did not know. Was there a physician? Yes. Name him. Julian's jaw tightened. Marin understood before he answered. There was no physician. He was not licensed in the territory. Name him. Silence. Marin felt the last fragile possibility die. The original illness had been another story. Perhaps she had suffered heat exhaustion. Perhaps a rash. Perhaps nothing more than a child fainting after running in summer. Her parents had found an opening and built 12 years around it. Why? She asked. Julian looked at her then. There was anger in his face, but beneath it something almost worse. He wanted to be understood. The first basket sold for more than this ranch earned in 3 months, he said. Marin went still. You were 10. You had copied that broken tray from the old collection. Thorne saw it. He said nobody alive could make that knot. So you told him nobody alive had. Julian's eyes sharpened. You think it began as a grand scheme? We had debts. Drought had destroyed 2 herds. The bank was ready to take the north acreage. I sold 1 piece. Won one, and then people wanted another. Marin looked at the house behind him. Imported tile, carved railings, new roofs, irrigated gardens, silk dresses, galleries, land. You saved the ranch quickly, she said. Julian's mouth tightened. You were a child. You don't know what poverty does to a family. I know what you did to one. His face hardened. We gave you comfort. You gave me a cot beside acid. We fed you. You reduced my food when I worked slowly. We protected you. You locked me in a room. You were safe. From what? Julian had no answer that did not sound like himself. Marin felt no satisfaction. She had imagined this confrontation differently during the few hours since learning the full truth. In imagination, there had been one sentence she could say that would make him understand what he had done. Now she saw the flaw in that hope. Understanding was not a door she could open for him. He had stood beside the door for 12 years and chosen the lock. You can go, she said. Julian stared. Marin, I am not asking anything else. His expression shifted toward the old authority. You do not dismiss your father. The marshal stepped closer. Marin looked at Julian's handcuffs. I just did. They led him away. Marin watched until the carriage disappeared beyond the gate. Then she went inside because the afternoon sun was beginning to sting the tops of her shoulders in an entirely ordinary way. Eleanor asked to see her that evening. Marin almost refused. Koyath, who had spent most of the day helping investigators identify materials in the annex, did not advise her either way. What would you do? Marin asked. He was coiling willow strips on the work table. I'm not you. That is becoming an irritating answer. It is still true. She leaned against the bench. Do you forgive people? Koyath looked up. When I feel like it. That is not very spiritual. My grandmother was spiritual. She also held grudges with impressive discipline. Marin laughed. Then the laughter faded. I want to know why Mother did it. You may not like the answer. I have disliked most answers this week. Then you have practice. Eleanor sat in her bedroom in a robe, her hair unpinned for the first time Marin could remember. Without powder and silk, she looked smaller. Marin remained near the doorway. Her mother gestured to a chair. Marin stayed standing. Eleanor folded her hands. I suppose you hate me. Marin felt tired at once. You asked to see me. I don't know what to say. That makes two of us. Eleanor looked toward the window. It was open. Marin noticed that and nearly laughed at the cruelty of ordinary air. Your father began it, Eleanor said. Marin waited. I did not know about the first sale until afterward. He told me it was temporary. We would sell 2 or 3 pieces, pay the bank, then stop. But you applied the chemical, later. How much later? Eleanor closed her eyes. Marin. How much later? Months. So for months you knew I was healthy. I knew you were sensitive to acid. At first the mixture was weaker. Marin stared. Eleanor hurried on. You had always been anxious in bright rooms. Your father said isolation would keep you calm while we settled the debt. Then Thorne wanted more work. Buyers wanted the pieces darker, older. The compound changed, and you put it on me. I was afraid you would leave. The room seemed to contract. There it was. Not concern, not medicine, fear of losing control. You could have asked me to stay. You were 11. And when I was 15, Eleanor's eyes filled. When I was 18, Marin asked. 20? I kept thinking we would stop. When? After the next season. After the next loan. After the house was secure. After Thorne's contracts ended. But the contracts never ended. Eleanor looked down. No, because you liked the money. Her mother's face twisted. It was not only money. What else? Respect. The word came out almost angrily. Eleanor stood. You don't know what people thought of us before the collection. Your father's ranch was failing. My family considered my marriage a mistake. We were invited nowhere. Then the museums came. Scholars wrote letters. Governors ate at our table. People listened when Julian spoke. Marin watched her. And that was worth me? Eleanor's anger collapsed. No, but you paid with me anyway. Tears slipped down her mother's face. I loved you. Marin believed her. That was the most painful part. She believed Eleanor had felt something she called love while carrying acid into the annex. She believed her mother had sat awake some nights convincing herself that tomorrow would be the last treatment. She believed Eleanor had probably suffered. None of that opened the door. Maybe you did, Marin said. Eleanor looked up hopefully. Marin continued. But love that needs a person to remain frightened is not something I can live inside. Her mother began to cry harder. Marin felt compassion rise and did not mistake it for obligation. I hope you tell the truth in court, she said. Then she left. The investigation lasted 3 days on the property and months beyond it. Marin did not stay for all of it. By the second day, the annex was crowded with evidence tags. Federal agents photographed shelves. Curators examined the baskets. A chemist collected samples of treated willow. Clerks copied account books. Marin discovered that being surrounded by people could feel as confining as being alone when every person wanted to ask what happened. So she chose what to take: the copper mirror, her awls, 2 knives, the smooth river stone Julian had given her, though she almost left it behind. In the end, she kept it because his lie did not change the stone. Water had still shaped the dent. That part remained true. She took no finished basket. A marshal offered her the centerpiece. It is your property, he said. Marin looked at the darkened fibers. My work is in it. Yes, so is their lie. You could sell it legitimately now, with your name. She imagined the basket in another glass case, admired for the scandal attached to it. No, what should we do with it? Keep it as evidence. After that, put it somewhere people can see what was done. The marshal nodded. You do not want it back? Marin touched the rim once. No, she packed fresh willow instead. Koyath waited near his truck at sunrise on the 4th day. Hannah stood beside him. Marin had heard about her many times through the vent, but they had not yet met properly. Hannah wore a blue work shirt, a long skirt dusty at the hem, and an expression that suggested she would tolerate nonsense only if it was entertaining. So, Hannah said, looking Marin over, you're the woman who made my brother spend community funds on the most expensive new basket in Arizona. Koyath groaned. Marin glanced at him. How expensive? Do not answer that, Koyath said. Hannah smiled. Marin smiled back. It was the easiest introduction she had ever had. They loaded her small bundle into the truck. Marin climbed into the passenger seat. The machine's vibration moved through the floorboards and up her legs. 4 days earlier, an engine had sent her hiding beneath a table. Now she gripped the edge of the seat and waited for fear to pass. Koyath started forward. The estate gate opened. Marin had seen it only from far inside the courtyard. Up close, the iron bars looked less impressive than they had in imagination. They crossed the threshold. No one stopped them. For the first mile, Marin kept both hands in her lap. Then Hana, riding in the back, leaned forward between the seats. Open the window. Koyath frowned. Give her time. I am giving her a window. Marin looked at the handle. She turned it. Glass lowered. Wind rushed inside. Her hair whipped across her mouth. She gasped. Hana laughed. Terrible, isn't it? Marin put one hand into the moving air. Pressure spread across her palm. Dust caught beneath her fingernails. Heat touched the back of her wrist. The wind did not tear her. It pushed. It moved. It smelled of dry grass, sun-warmed stone, livestock, and distance. Marin began laughing. She could not stop. Koyath glanced at her, smiling despite himself. She leaned closer to the open window until the wind pulled tears from her eyes. For years her parents had treated her body like evidence of weakness. The world was teaching her otherwise, one sensation at a time. At the first stream crossing, Koyath stopped the truck. Marin stepped down. Water moved over stones in a shallow, bright sheet. Real running water. She stood on the bank without speaking. The smooth stone in her pocket suddenly felt heavier. Julian had claimed it came from a spring. Maybe it had. Maybe it came from the driveway. She would never know. Marin walked to the edge and removed her shoes. Koyath said nothing. Hana said cold. Marin put one foot in. The shock shot up her leg. She yelped. Hana laughed again. Warn me before you say cold, Marin said. I did, not adequately. Marin stepped deeper. Water curled around her ankles. She picked up a stone from the stream and compared it with the one Julian had given her. Different color. Similar weight. She threw Julian's stone into the current. It landed with a splash and vanished beneath the moving surface. Then she reconsidered, waited 2 steps, found it again, and put it back in her pocket. Koyath raised an eyebrow. I changed my mind, she said. You are allowed. The words were simple. Marin stood in the water and let them settle. They reached the reservation settlement late in the afternoon. Marin had expected something ceremonial because her mind still arranged unknown things according to stories. Instead, she found laundry moving on lines, dogs sleeping under wagons, children arguing over a wheel rim, smoke rising from cooking fires, and 3 women sitting beneath a ramada complaining about willow that had been cut too late in the season. Ordinary life. It overwhelmed her more than the gala. Nobody had prepared a stage. Nobody waited to stare at the escaped lunar child. Hana introduced her by name. Not as Julian Sterling's daughter. Not as the ghost weaver, Marin. An elder named Nalina sat beneath the shade with a shallow tray across her knees. Her fingers were bent with age but moved confidently over Devil's Claw and Willow. Koyath spoke quietly to her. She listened, then looked at Marin. Bring your hands, she said. Marin did not understand. Nalina held out both palms. Marin approached and placed her hands in them. The elder turned them over. She examined the calluses along Marin's forefingers, the small scars at the thumb joint, the thickened pad where an awl rested. She did not touch the irritated chemical marks except to note them with a glance. Sit, she said. Marin sat. Hana handed Nalina a small sample Marin had woven during the ride's lunch stop. It was only a strip, enough to show the hidden return. The elder felt it. Her thumb stopped. She traced the knot twice. Then she closed her eyes. Nobody spoke. When she opened them, she looked at Koyath first. You were right. Koyath exhaled. Nalina looked at Marin. Who taught you to finish here? She pressed the hidden return. No one. Someone taught you the beginning. My father brought fragments, drawings, broken pieces. From where? I don't know. Nalina nodded as though the answer fit something she already suspected. My aunt remembered this bind, she said. She could describe it, but not make it by the time I was old enough to learn. Her mother had known. Marin looked at her hands. I thought I invented part of it. You did. Marin looked up. Nalina smiled faintly. People think tradition means never changing. That is how museums think. Living hands solve problems. Your hands solved one our hands had forgotten. Marin swallowed. Does that mean I am allowed to teach it? The elder's eyebrows rose. Allowed by whom? Marin almost said my father. The old reflex embarrassed her. Nalina waited. Marin said, by the people it belongs to. The elder nodded. Better question. She looked around the circle of women. The stitch belongs to a history larger than any one person. Teaching must honor that history. But hiding it would serve the same silence that nearly killed it. Marin breathed out slowly. Nalina handed the woven sample back. First you will rest. Marin frowned. I can work. I did not say you could not. I have worked 14 hours a day for years. That is not the argument you think it is. Hana covered a smile. Nalina continued. You will eat. You will sleep. You will let your skin heal. You will learn which stories belong with the stitch. Because technique without people becomes exactly what your father sold. Marin lowered her eyes. Yes. And then, Nalina said, you will show me where my fingers are wrong. Marin looked up. The elder smiled. For the first time since leaving the annex, Marin felt something that was not relief, fear, anger, or wonder. She felt useful without being owned. That night she slept in a small room in Hannah's house with an actual window beside the bed. Marin nearly asked for it to be covered. Instead, she left it open. Moonlight lay across the floorboards. Crickets sounded outside. A dog barked twice and stopped. Wind moved the curtain. Marin woke 6 times. Each time she saw the open window and panicked for one sharp instant. Each time she remembered where she was. On the 7th waking, just before dawn, she did not panic at all. The first week outside the Sterling estate exhausted Marin more than any week at the loom. Freedom had weight. It was the weight of choosing when to wake, what to eat, where to sit, whether to answer a question, whether to open a door, whether to leave it open. In the annex, every hour had been assigned. She had resented the schedule only after she understood what it was. Now without it, she sometimes stood in the middle of Hana's kitchen, unable to decide whether she wanted tea or water. Hana never hurried her. She also refused to make choices for her when the choice was harmless. What do you want for breakfast? Hana asked on the 3rd morning. Whatever you are having. That is not an answer. I don't know. Eggs or cornmeal. Which is better? For what? For breakfast. Hana looked at her for a long moment. Both are breakfast. Marin felt sudden, unreasonable anger. Then why ask me? Hana set down the spoon. Because you can choose. Marin looked away. The anger vanished as quickly as it came, leaving shame behind. I'm sorry. Don't apologize because choices are hard. I snapped at you. You did. I should apologize for that. Fine. Accepted. Hana turned back to the stove. Eggs or cornmeal. Marin laughed despite herself. Eggs. See? Civilization survives. Koyath visited every day at first, though he rarely stayed long. Sometimes he brought fresh willow. Sometimes he brought newspapers containing stories about the Sterling fraud. Once he brought nothing and sat beneath the ramada repairing a basket rim while Marin watched Nalina teach a group of girls how to split devil's claw without shredding the fiber. The newspapers bothered Marin. The ghost Wever's alive, one headline declared. Sterling daughter held in secret workshop, said another. Mystery woman behind famensant coction. Marin folded each paper so the headline disappeared. Do they ever use my name? She asked. Koyath took the paper from her and scanned the article. 3rd paragraph. That is generous. They like ghosts more than people. I noticed. She pointed at a line. This says you rescued me. Koyath frowned. I did not. You helped. That is different. Marin looked at him. Will you tell them? I already did. What did you say? That you picked your own lock and walked into the gala while I was being sat on by 2 hired guards. Marin laughed hard enough that Nalina looked over from the ramada. Koyath waited until she stopped. They left that part out, he said. Not dramatic enough? Apparently a woman freeing herself causes trouble for the headline. Marin took the paper back. Then we will make the next part harder to simplify. The court case began in Santa Fe 3 months later. By then, the government had traced 43 sterling pieces through auctions, private sales, museum loans, and estate transfers. Some buyers had paid small fortunes. Others had donated works to institutions and claimed charitable deductions. Thorne's certificates appeared on most of them. Silas Thorne tried to cooperate early. He provided correspondence, pricing records, and names of intermediaries. He insisted Julian had misled him about Marin's medical condition and claimed he had believed the family possessed access to an unknown historical cache. Then investigators found a letter in which Thorne complained that a particular basket had been delivered too green for East Coast buyers and instructed Julian to increase treatment time before shipment. Cooperation became confession. Marin testified on the 2nd day. The courtroom was brighter than the annex but dimmer than the gala. High windows let in strips of winter sun. Wooden benches creaked whenever someone shifted. The room smelled of wool coats, paper, dust, and the coal stove near the back wall. Julian sat beside his attorney. Eleanor sat at another table after agreeing to separate counsel. Marin had not seen either of them since leaving the estate. She expected fear. Instead, she felt distance. The prosecutor asked simple questions first. Where had she lived? Who locked the door? Who supplied the willow? What had she been told about her health? Who applied the chemical? How often? Did she know the baskets were being sold? No. Did she receive payment? No. Could she leave the room without permission? No. Had she tried? Not until the gala. The defense attorney approached carefully. He was good. Marin recognized that at once. His voice was soft. His questions sounded reasonable. Miss Sterling, your parents provided you food, clothing, and specialized accommodation, correct? Yes. They also supplied materials for a craft you enjoyed. I enjoyed weaving. And your father encouraged your talent. He sold it. A few people shifted on the benches. The attorney smiled as though she had made his point. But he did encourage you to continue. He threatened to reduce my food if I did not finish on schedule. The smile disappeared. He changed direction. You have acknowledged that as a child you were anxious in bright light. My parents told me I was. Did you experience discomfort? After they began using the compound, yes. Can you prove every symptom was caused by that compound? Marin looked at Dr. Pell seated behind the prosecutor, then back at the attorney. No, he relaxed slightly. I cannot prove what every pain in 12 years came from, Marin continued. I can prove the pain became worse after the liquid was put on me. I can prove the bottle warned against skin contact. I can prove I was healthy enough to stand under the gala lights. I can prove the door locked from the outside. And I can prove my father sold work I made while telling buyers the maker had been dead for a century. The attorney paused. Marin's hands rested calmly in her lap. For years, Julian had trained those hands to be precise under pressure. He had not understood where else the skill might be useful. Eleanor testified 2 days later. She told the truth. Not perfectly, not bravely at first. She minimized, she cried. She tried to distinguish fear from greed and complicity from obedience, but under questioning, she admitted that no doctor had diagnosed Marin with the lunar curse. She admitted Julian invented the name. She admitted the first period of isolation began after Thorne expressed interest in Marin's early weaving. She admitted applying patina compound to Marin's skin to create visible symptoms that would reinforce the story. When asked why, Eleanor said, because by then she believed us, and we were afraid she would stop believing. Marin closed her eyes. There was nothing more to learn. Julian never admitted wrongdoing beyond what the documents proved. He described the sales as reproductions misunderstood by buyers. He called Marin's confinement a parental medical decision. He argued that the family had invested in preserving an endangered technique and deserved compensation for discovering her talent. The jury did not agree. The charges related to fraud, unlawful confinement, assault through chemical exposure, falsified records, and theft of proceeds produced a long list of convictions. Thorne accepted a negotiated sentence in exchange for testimony and restitution information. Eleanor received a lesser sentence than Julian after cooperating fully, though the court still found her directly responsible for Marin's treatment and confinement. The Sterling estate was seized in part to satisfy claims. Museums returned works. Buyers filed suits. Auction houses issued embarrassed notices. Academic articles that had praised the Sterling collection were retracted or rewritten. Marin did not attend the sentencing. She was by the river with Nalina. They were testing a new batch of willow. This one, Nalina said, bending a rib, wants to crack. It was cut too late. You blame the branch. I blame whoever cut it. Nalina nodded toward Koyath on the opposite bank. He cut it. Marin raised her voice. Koyath. He looked up. This willow is terrible. He examined the branch in his hand. It was growing in shade. That is not a defense. It is an explanation. Nalina smiled. Court is done today, yes? Marin's hand slowed. Yes. You want to know the sentence? I will hear it eventually. Nalina said nothing. Marin worked another strip around the base. After a minute, she added, I thought it would feel more important. What? The court deciding what they did was wrong. Nalina pulled a fiber tight. Did you need the court to tell you? No. Then perhaps the court is for other people. Marin considered that. The law mattered. Restitution mattered. Public truth mattered. Consequences mattered. But none of those things could return the 12 years. Justice, she realized, was not a machine that restored what had been taken. Sometimes it merely prevented the thief from keeping it. That was enough for one day. By spring, the irritated skin on Marin's arms had healed almost completely. Some pale marks remained near her wrists and along her neck where the strongest compound had caused repeated burns. She stopped trying to decide whether she hated them. They were neither shame nor proof of strength. They were skin. The first time a photographer asked her to pull down her collar so the marks would show more clearly, she said no. The man looked surprised. But they are part of the story. So are my hands. He photographed her hands instead. That image traveled farther than any picture of her face, calloused fingers holding green willow beneath open sky. A museum in Albuquerque asked Marin and Nalina to consult on a new exhibition about water stitch weaving. The original invitation used the phrase rediscovered lost craft. Marin sent it back with corrections. Not rediscovered, reconstructed and restored through living community knowledge. Not lost, interrupted. Not Sterling collection. Works produced by Marin Sterling under coercion and falsely marketed as historical Apache artifacts. The curator accepted every change. When the exhibition opened, one of Marin's forged baskets sat behind glass beside the chemical bottle taken from the annex. The label did not call the basket ancient. It did not romanticize the fraud. It named Marin as the maker and explained the deception. Across the room stood a new basket, untreated willow, natural color, woven jointly by Marin, Nalina, Hana, Koyath, and 6 young apprentices. The label listed every name. Marin stood in front of it for a long time. Hana joined her. "You're doing the face," Hana said. Marin looked over. "What face? The one where you try not to look emotional." Marin laughed. "I learned it from doctors, bad habit." The museum visitors moved around them. Some recognized Marin. Most did not. She liked that. A girl of perhaps 12 stood near the new basket, studying the weave. She turned to her mother. "How did they make it hold water?" Marin almost answered. Then she stopped. The mother read from the label about tension, willow preparation, and the hidden return. The girl leaned closer, not to admire a dead mystery, to understand a living technique. Marin felt something settle into place. That evening, Koyath drove her home from the museum. For months, she had called Hana's house home because it was easier than naming the uncertain future. Then, with restitution money placed legally in her own name, Marin had rented a small adobe house near the river. The first thing she changed was the bedroom window. It was too small. Koyath helped her cut a larger opening in the wall. Hana said this was an unnecessarily dramatic response to childhood confinement. Marin said it was exactly dramatic enough. The new window faced east. On museum night, moonlight lay across her floor when they arrived. Koyath carried a box of leftover exhibition catalogs to the table. Marin opened one. Her name appeared on the first page, not hidden in the 3rd paragraph. Not attributed to Sterling Holdings, Marin Sterling, weaver and teacher. She traced the printed words. "You hate being called teacher," Koyath said. "I am becoming less bad at it. That is not the same as liking it. I like teaching. I dislike being watched while I teach. You chose a museum career badly." She threw a folded cloth at him. He caught it. For a moment they looked at each other. Their relationship had changed so slowly Marin could not identify when. At first Koyath had been the voice at the vent. Then the man at the gala. Then a guide to places she had never seen. Then a colleague who argued about willow moisture and corrected her when she over-tightened a rim after working too long. He did not treat her freedom as a debt to him. That allowed affection to grow without obligation attached. Marin valued that more than any romantic speech he might have made. They had not named what was happening between them. She was not in a hurry. A life defined by other people's deadlines had made her protective of slow things. Koyath set the cloth on the table. "There is a training circle tomorrow." "I know. You said you would rest after the museum opening." "I will rest tonight." "That is not what you said." Marin narrowed her eyes. "You remember everything inconvenient. It is a gift. Go home." He smiled. At the door he paused. "Marin." "Yes, the East Ridge is clear. Sunrise should be good." She knew what he was offering. Not permission company. "I'll meet you by the river." He nodded and left. 1 year after the gala, Marin sat beneath the Ramada with 8 students around her. The youngest was 13. The oldest was nearly 60. Hana taught beside her, despite continuing to claim that teaching required too much patience for a reasonable person. The lesson was the hidden return. Marin had delayed teaching it for months, not because she wanted secrecy, because Nalina had insisted every student first understand the ordinary structure beneath it. "A beautiful finish on a weak basket is still a weak basket," the elder said. Marin repeated that often enough that the students had begun repeating it back to annoy her. That morning she held a damp strip of willow between both hands. "Do not watch my fingers first," she said. A boy named Tomas frowned. "How do we learn it if we don't watch? Feel your own tension." That sounds like something Nalina says when she doesn't want to answer. The circle laughed. Marin smiled. "Fine, watch once. Then close your eyes." She demonstrated slowly. The movement that had once taken place in secret beneath one oil lamp now happened under open daylight. A breeze moved through the ramada. Somewhere nearby, corn roasted. Children shouted near the water pump. A dog slept directly in the path where everyone had to step over it. Nothing about the scene was grand. That made it precious. Marin finished the knot. "Now you," she said. The students tried. Most failed. One strip snapped. Another knot slipped loose. Tomas somehow tied his working fiber to the basket beside him. Hannah laughed until tears came. Marin showed them again. No one was punished for getting it wrong. No ration depended on perfection. No collector waited upstairs. The work could be difficult without being cruel. That distinction had taken Marin almost a year to trust. At midday, she walked to the river with Koyath. They carried an unfinished burden basket between them. The new piece was enormous. Commissioned not by a collector, but by the tribal council for the community teaching hall. Every apprentice who completed the foundational course would add 1 row. Marin would execute the ceiling returns at the end, but the basket would not belong to her alone. They set it beneath a cottonwood. Koyath examined the base. "You pulled this row too tight." Marin looked offended. "I did not." He pointed. "Here," she pressed the weave. He was right. "I was distracted." "By what?" "You." Koyath looked up. Marin let him sit with that for a second. Then she added, "You were complaining about the museum labels." He shook his head. "Cruel. I learned from experts. They worked in companionable silence. The willow was good that season. Spring water had run long enough to keep the shoots supple without making them soft. Marin liked to harvest near dawn, when the bark separated cleanly and the stems still held night coolness. She had become physically stronger, not dramatically, not in the way newspaper stories like to describe transformation. Her back still hurt after long days. Her fingers still cramped in cold weather. The old chemical burn sometimes itched when the air turned dry, but her body no longer felt like an enemy waiting to betray her. It felt like a body hungry sometimes, tired sometimes, capable often. She had learned the difference between pain and danger. That knowledge alone had remade her life. A hot pan burned because it was hot. Cold river water hurt because it was cold. Sun at noon could redden skin if she stayed too long. None of those ordinary warnings required a mythology of curses. The world was not harmless. It simply was not designed to kill her. Koyath held the ribs while Marin tightened a row. "Do you ever miss the annex?" he asked. She stopped. The question might have offended her months earlier. Now she considered it. Yes. Koyath did not react. "I miss knowing exactly where everything was," she said. "I miss the silence sometimes. I miss being able to work without people asking me questions. That last one seems reasonable. I do not miss the door. No, or the chemical. No, or my father." Koyath glanced at her. Marin tied the next crossing. "I miss the person I thought he was," she said. "That is different." Koyath nodded. "And my mother?" Marin continued. "Sometimes I remember her bringing warm bread when I was small, before the annex. Then I remember the brush in her hand. She pulled the willow tight. Both memories are true. I hate that. You don't have to make them agree." Marin looked at him. That sentence stayed with her. She had spent her childhood inside a story where every contradiction was explained away by the curse. Love meant confinement. Pain meant treatment. Silence meant safety. Work meant therapy. Now she allowed contradictory truths to remain contradictory. Eleanor had loved her in some way. Eleanor had harmed her deliberately. Julian had taught her to value precision. Julian had exploited the skill precision created. The annex had been a prison. It had also been the place where Marin became a master weaver. She did not need to bleach one truth to preserve another. The basket grew stronger because each strand held tension against another without becoming the same strand. Perhaps memory worked that way too. Late that afternoon, Nalina joined them by the river. She carried a small clay cup and sat beneath the cottonwood without asking permission. "I heard the museum wants to buy your new basket," she said. Marin groaned. "They want to commission one. For how much?" Koyath looked interested. Marin pointed at him. "You are not allowed to become my father. I was going to say they should pay you more. That is how it begins." Nalina laughed. Then she became serious. Sell work if you want. Museums are not evil because they have walls. Marin looked at the river. I know. Money is not evil because your father wanted too much of it. I know. Then why are you afraid to charge for your work? Marin did not answer. The question cut closer than she liked. For a year she had accepted teaching stipends and restitution funds, but she had refused several private commissions. Part of her feared that selling a basket would turn it back into the thing it had been in the annex. Koyath remained quiet. Nalina drank from the clay cup. You think keeping the work cheap will keep your hands free? Maybe. It will keep you poor. Marin smiled despite herself. Nalina continued. Your father's crime was not receiving money. It was stealing your choice, stealing the story, and lying about the people whose tradition he used. Marin looked at her hands. Then I can sell one, if you want. The phrase mattered, if you want. Marin accepted the museum commission that week. She wrote the contract with Hana beside her and insisted on 3 conditions. Her name and the names of community collaborators would appear prominently. The technique would be described as living Apache weaving tradition, not a lost curiosity. A portion of the fee would fund materials for apprentices. The museum agreed. When the first payment arrived, Marin held the check for a long time. Koyath found her staring at it at the kitchen table. Something wrong? No. Then why do you look angry? I made a basket and someone paid me. That is generally how commissions work. They asked first. Koyath understood they asked, he said. I said yes. You did, and the money came to me. Yes. Marin laughed softly. It was such a small structure. Ask, choose, agree, pay. Her parents had complicated the world in order to hide how simple respect could be. Years later, visitors would stand in museums and see Marin Sterling's name on woven vessels. Some would know the scandal, some would not. Children would press their faces too close to the glass until guards asked them to step back. Scholars would debate exactly how much of the reconstructed water stitch came from surviving fragments and how much emerged from Marin's independent problem-solving. Community weavers would correct those scholars when necessary. The technique would change again, because living traditions changed. Hana developed a faster preparation method for younger Willow. Tomas, once he stopped tying his working fiber to neighboring baskets, became unusually skilled at broad storage forms. Koyath preferred older harvesting patterns and complained that everyone was in too much of a hurry. Nalina lived long enough to see 3 full classes complete the ceiling bind. She died one winter with a half-finished tray beside her bed and strict instructions that nobody make the funeral sentimental. Marin ignored that last instruction only slightly. The copper mirror remained in her house. For years she kept it on a shelf near the east window. Visitors assumed it was an heirloom of great importance. In one sense it was. In another, it was only a piece of hammered metal that had once told the truth because nobody had thought to teach it how to lie. Marin rarely used it. She did not need to check whether her face was monstrous. Some morning she caught her reflection accidentally while carrying Willow past the window. The woman in the copper grew older. Sun brought color to her skin. Fine lines appeared beside her eyes. A streak of gray showed in her hair. Marin liked every change. Age had been something her father manufactured for profit. Now it happened honestly. One evening, long after the Sterling name had stopped appearing in newspapers, Marin and Koyath sat outside her house, finishing the rim of a large water vessel. The sun had gone down behind the ridge. The sky held the deep purple Koyath had described through the vent on the first night they spoke. Marin remembered asking him what moonlight looked like. At the time, she had tried to build the world from his sentences. Now she could look up. The first star appeared. Koyath handed her a wet strip. Too soft, she said. It will tighten when it dries. It will sag first. You have become impossible. I was always impossible. I was simply locked up. Koyath smiled. They replaced the strip. Their hands worked together without much conversation. He held the structural tension. Marin closed the return. The rhythm of the work was the same one he had once sent through limestone toward a woman he did not know. 3 quick movements, 1 firm pull, pause. Marin heard it now not as a rescue signal, but as part of ordinary life. That pleased her more than any monument could have. She looked toward the darkening river. Do you remember the first basket you bought? The ridiculously expensive one? Hana has trained you well. I remember. Where is it? In the teaching hall. Marin frowned. I thought the museum had it. They returned it after the investigation. The council accepted it. You never told me. You said you didn't want it. I don't. Then I respected your wishes. Marin considered throwing a willow strip at him. Instead, she asked, "What do they use it for?" "Nothing." "Then why keep it?" Koyath tied off a temporary brace. "So students can compare the chemical-aged fiber with living wood, and because the first basket led us to you." Marin looked down at her hands. The basket had once represented everything stolen from her. Now it had become a lesson. Perhaps that was the closest thing to reclaiming it she wanted. The moon rose. Its light fell silver on the river stones, white on dry grass, almost blue on the willow leaves. Koyath had described it accurately all those years ago. Marin smiled. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. That expression is not nothing. You were right about moonlight." Koyath looked up at the sky. "I usually am. Do not ruin the moment." They worked until the basket was ready to rest overnight. Marin stood and stretched her back. The desert air had cooled. Sage carried on the wind. Somewhere farther down the settlement, someone burned cedar. Crickets pulsed in the grass. Every scent was familiar now. That was perhaps the greatest change. The world that had once seemed impossibly large had become home through repetition. Not smaller, familiar. Marin walked to the edge of the porch and breathed deeply. No one measured the breath. No one counted her exposure. No one waited with a brush and an amber bottle. Behind her, the copper mirror caught a faint line of moonlight through the open window. Beside her, Koyath lifted the finished frame out of the dust. Ahead, the river moved in darkness, carrying water through bends no basket could ever fully imitate. Marin thought of the hidden return, the knot that disappeared inside its own structure so cleanly that an untrained eye could not find where it ended. For years, her parents had tried to do the same thing with her life. Hide the living end. Bury the maker inside the object. Make the woman vanish so completely that only the artifact remained. They had failed. Not because truth was magically stronger than lies. Lies had been strong enough to hold her for 12 years. They failed because wood retained sap. Chemicals left residue. Ledgers kept numbers. A stranger recognized a knot. A woman found a bottle. A lock had tumblers. Water washed skin clean. A door opened. Freedom had not arrived as one miracle. It had been made from evidence, doubt, anger, help, risk, and choice. Stitch by stitch. Marin lifted her face toward the open sky. The night did not belong to the curse her parents had invented. The sun did not belong to Marin Sterling. The water stitch did not belong to collectors who needed its makers dead in order to admire it. And Marin no longer belonged to the room where she had learned it. She belonged to herself. Koyath called from behind her. "You coming?" Marin turned. He was carrying the basket toward the workshop, leaving the door open with his foot. The light inside spilled across the ground. Marin looked once more at the horizon, then followed him. She did not hurry. There was no deadline. There was no bolt sliding shut behind her. The door remained open to the night.